Hi, welcome back to World History. We are going to finish up World War II today and look at the United Nations. And then we'll be ready for a review tomorrow, which involves a Zoom meeting. So make sure that you are ready for that. I believe the time is at 11 a.m. So join us for a Zoom meeting. I'll give you a couple of tips about the test that will open on Monday. Okay. So right now, though, we do need to finish up the end of World War II. We were talking on Wednesday, I believe it was. Yes, Wednesday, about island hopping and how the United States had conquered Iwo Jima and Okinawa, but both of these were horrific battles that cost many American and Japanese lives. And now we need to go back to Europe. We're going to finish up in Europe, and then we'll see how Japan finishes, how the battle against Japan finishes up as well. Okay, so we had Germany on the run. We had landed at Normandy and pushed across Europe, trying to get German forces back into Germany. The Russians were advancing from the east. The American and British troops, as well as some French troops, marching from the west, both going to meet together in Germany. What we did not know was that at the time, the general population did not know that the major leaders of the war at Yalta are going to agree that Russia can move in first. And it's going to play a part in our next chapter more so than this one, but we'll see how that works. And I'm not sure how much we'll get into this year, but we will definitely discuss it next year in U.S. history. So anyway, the Russians are advancing from the east. The Allied troops advance from the west. And the Germans decide to give one last all-in attempt to win this war at the Battle of the Bulge. And you see that pictured here on this map, how they bulged it out. They just pushed with everything they had to get back into Belgium and into France. But eventually the Allies were able to push them back. The big three leaders, Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill, meet at Yalta to discuss how we're going to end this war. And at that point, they decide, it's got to be an all-out surrender. Germany cannot do any more of this halfway surrender thing. We've all got to participate. So they had plans to end the war. Stalin promised at that point that he would help in the Pacific once the war in Europe was over. We'll see how that plays out in just a minute. And they also, at that point, as I said, promised that the Soviets could take Berlin first. And this is just a matter of Stalin playing games with people. He's not to be trusted. Okay. The Allies continue advancing to Berlin, and at the end of April of 1945, Hitler commits suicide. He and his new wife both die in a bunker. They tell the German people that he died leading the troops into battle, but that was not the case. VE Day is May 8th, 1945, another one of those important dates. You have several in this chapter that you need to note. May 8th, 1945. The reason we have the word Holocaust here is that many across the globe had no idea what was going on in concentration camps like Auschwitz until the Russians and the American soldiers arrived into those areas of Germany and Poland and freed those prisoners. We were horrified across the globe. Not me personally, because I wasn't alive. But the world was horrified. Oddly enough, as I told you, VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, is May 8th, 1945. That falls just a few weeks after the death of Franklin Roosevelt. He dies in April of 1945. Also at that point in April, Winston Churchill is up for re-election and he loses to Clement Attlee. So at the Potsdam Conference that was in it was in the end of 1945. We have two new leaders. Truman has replaced Roosevelt. Attlee has replaced Churchill. Stalin is still there. They meet again. They plan out a course for Germany for now that they've surrendered. What do we do now? And how do we plan things out? What's next? And at that point, these three big leaders warn Japan, we're coming after you. It's an all-out effort. Excuse me. We are going to come after Japan. We warn them that they need to go ahead and surrender. Japan refuses to do so. That is in June, July of 1945, somewhere in there. So Harry Truman, who knew absolutely nothing about the bombs before they were dropped, before he became president, not before they were dropped, but before he became president, agrees to drop the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. It instantly kills 70,000 civilians, and another 70,000 are wounded. Nagasaki happens just a few days later. Hiroshima, the bomb is dropped on August 6th of 1945, not a date you have to remember. On August 8th, 2 days later, the Soviets finally make good on their promise to declare war on Japan. And on August 9th, an American fighter, a bomber, drops the bomb on Nagasaki. And that one kills about 40,000 civilians instantly. And another 40-ish thousand are wounded and will die later of their injuries. At this point, we tell Japan, Tokyo's next. Now, that's what we tell them. As Americans, we tell them the next bomb's going into Tokyo. So 5 days later, on August 14th, Japan verbally surrenders, but the actual surrender is going to happen in September. They verbally say, okay, we give up. We're done. We're done fighting. What Japan did not know at the time was we didn't have another bomb. We had made 3. We had tested 1 and 2 had been dropped. It was going to take us months to get another bomb. So we're very glad that they surrendered. But had they not surrendered, we would have been in deep trouble. So the actual end date for the war with Japan, if you want to add that here, is September 2nd of 1945. September 2nd of 1945. So you have several dates you need to know. September 1st of 1939 is the start of World War II. December 7th, 1941 is the bombing of Pearl Harbor. June 6th of 1944 is D-Day, the day we moved back into Europe to attack. May 8th of 1945 is Victory in Europe Day. And September 2nd of 1945 is VE Day. Okay, last thing is we need to wrap this up. Okay, wrap up World War II. The fighting is now over with, but how do we go back to peace? I got 6 minutes. All right, so there's a conference in San Francisco in late 1945 where the leaders of the world are planning how to restore peace to the world and where do we go from here. So they're making plans for Japan and for China now that they're free. How do we restore governments in these places and that kind of thing. So at the conference in San Francisco in 1945, they come up with a plan for the United Nations. This is going to look similar to the League of Nations that started after World War I, but not quite the same. They've learned a few lessons from what the League of Nations could and could not do. So they're going to design the United Nations slightly differently. It is going to have 3 main branches listed here: Secretariat, the General Assembly, and the Security Council. The Secretariat is the administrative branch. That's what administers the United Nations day in and day out. The United Nations is now housed permanently in New York City. And the Secretary General is the one who heads up the Secretariat. he is chosen, he or she is chosen as by election from all the members of the General Assembly. The General Assembly is all the member nations. Okay? All the member nations. No matter how big or small, every nation that is a member of the United Nations has a representative in the United Nations in the General Assembly. They all get together and they choose the Secretary General, who is part of the Secretariat, the day-to-day administration. The last group, though, is the Security Council, and these are kind of like the Supreme Court of the United States in similar roles is what I'm talking about here. The Security Council is a group of 5 permanent members and 10 members elected by the General Assembly for a 2-year term. So the country of the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa might be part of the Security Council right now, but they are not a permanent member. They would be elected, okay? I don't know who the 10 non-permanent members are right now. I did not look that up. The 5 permanent members are the United States, Great Britain, France, Russia, and China. Those 5 countries. Let me do them again so you can write them down. United States, Great Britain, France, Russia, and China. Those 5 members are permanent members, and they have veto power. Anything they don't want the UN to do will not happen. Okay? They can exercise veto power over anything the UN does. Okay, so why does it not work? The UN, it does not work. It's not very effective. It has some serious shortcomings. Now, don't get me wrong, the UN has done some good worldwide. Some. But it has some serious problems. And there are two big problems that the UN has. The first is it lacks authority. It can suggest things to countries, but it cannot force a country to do what it wants, what the UN wants it to do. Okay? The UN has for years been telling Iran to get rid of nuclear weapons. It has for years been telling North Korea to quit threatening the rest of the world. It has no power of enforcement. None. Okay? So it lacks authority. The second thing, though, is this, what I was just explaining about the Security Council. The Security Council means that each permanent member has veto power. This weakens the UN. Because for the first several years, we were in the middle of the Cold War, which we will discuss in the next chapter if you're not familiar with it. In that Cold War, the over 47 things that came up before the UN, I think your book mentions 47, 45 of them, or somewhere in there, I may be off on my numbers, were rejected by the Soviet Union, which is what Russia's name was. So they turned down everything. Everything that was good the UN tried to do, Russia said, nope, can't do it, can't do it, can't do it. So they've taken away its power, okay? So that finishes our chapter. We are finished with chapter 22. We will meet tomorrow in a Zoom class. Come with your questions, and we will discuss what your test will look like early next week. Okay? Have a good day.